Police have very few tools to do any crime fighting or crime solving, and if the community won't give them information and they can't deal with the community or they don't have trust, that really they have no ability to learn anything. When police believe that they have to stop people in order to learn stuff, and then they wind up disproportionately stopping people of color, that has a whole impact on the community. And so police need to understand what those impacts are. The only way police can actually function is if they have the respect and have the support of the community. So it's really an efficiency issue more than just a political one, a policy. Most people are talking about 911 response when they're talking about taking these functions away from police. But more than half of officers don't work in 911. They're not beat officers. They're doing other kind of things. They're on special teams, they're detectives, they're different kind of functional units. And so part of the reimagining has to look at that other half, because if you're talking about cutting 50%, you have to see where the money is. And the money isn't really all in where people seem to think that the money is. Police, when they are being disciplined or when they're being evaluated, especially on use of force, do what's called a final frame analysis. So was the use of force justified in the final frame? Frame being like the final frame of video. And it's quite possible that in the final frame, you felt that you were in jeopardy or you felt that there was imminent danger. But the real issue is, why did you put yourself in that position in the first place? There was this case in Georgia, the cop and the guy who ultimately wound up dead, were talking for, half an hour or something back and forth. And the officers had the guy's car. They had his keys. They knew who he was. They knew where he lived. So, he did something he wasn't supposed to do. He grabbed the guy's taser and ran. But it wasn't like they had to do anything. They knew who he was. They could just wait a few minutes and drive around the corner and arrest him. So trying to change that mental attitude that you don't have to get your guy is, I think, just a crucial aspect to all of this. What a lot of people say is you get these young people and you give them a hot car and you give them a weapon and you give them a certain amount of authority, and, it's a recipe for bad stuff happening. It's a generalized problem across the country, this whole aspect of not necessarily just the militarization in terms of the use of tools, which is a serious problem, but there's just sort of a military attitude to we're going to control the community, and that just has to change. One of the things I learned in Oakland was, if you want cops to not act like cops, you have to order them to not act like cops in that sense. During the Oscar Grant demonstrations, I ordered them not to have their tank and not to come dressed in battle gear. I said, you should be demonstrating. This was an awful thing that happened, and thank goodness it wasn't OPD who did it. You need to bond with the community. But, when people start throwing bottles at them, then, it gets complicated. It's really easy to say, oh yes, well, mental health calls, that can be offloaded from police to social workers. But there are a lot of details in the sense of, how do you pair people up? Do you pair people up? How do you allocate people? How do you dispatch? How do you know in advance? How do you protect people? So you have to sort of imagine these things. You have to figure out, okay, what are the things that we do? We, the police, we, the city, and how do we best respond? And it may be that some of those things are with police and some of those things are not police, but the budget will come out of that. It's not going to come out of, some political determination. Let's cut X percent, because that just isn't really a way to make policy. So I think to the extent that we can, use our brain power, whatever that may be, to at least define some of these issues in a more precise and more clear way, that I think that can make a contribution to whoever we're dealing with.